Did you know that the great cathedral city of Ely was once an island in the middle of England? It sounds impossible, right? Surrounded by endless flat farmland and drained marshes, this historic city doesn't exactly seem coastal. But not so long ago, Ely, or as it is still sometimes known, the Isle of Ely, was truly an island, rising above a vast waterlogged wilderness. For centuries, the Fens, where Ely is located, were an untamed world of swamps, sluggish rivers, and shimmering meres, a place where boats, not roads, connected scattered pockets of dry land where the population concentrated. Medieval maps depict the Isle of Ely as a lonely outpost amid this watery maze. Even as the marshes were tamed and drained, the name endured, a relic of the region's wilder past. The draining of the Fens is one of Britain's most striking examples of human conquest over nature. This sweeping, low-lying landscape, now defined by open skies and carefully managed waterways, is not just a product of nature, but of human ingenuity. For centuries, people fought to transform a soggy, flood-prone wasteland into fertile farmland, reshaping the land in a feat of incredible engineering and ambition. So how did this marshy island landscape become the East Anglia that we know today? The arrival of the Romans around 43 AD marked the beginning of human efforts to tame the Fens. Coinciding with a natural fall in water levels, the Romans were able to construct the Fen Causeway, a gravel road up to 18 metres wide, linking central England with what would become East Anglia. This ambitious project demonstrated an early understanding of the use of engineering to overcome the challenges posed by this marshy terrain. Furthermore, there is evidence suggesting Roman attempts to drain parts of the Fens through sections of the Carr Dyke in Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire. A Roman coin, dating from between 138 to 181 AD, found in Woodland Fen, provides tangible evidence of Roman presence and activity in the area. Following the Roman departure, the early medieval period saw the emergence of Christian monasteries on the islands and edges of the Fens from around 500 AD. These monastic foundations, such as those at Crowland, Ely, Thorney, Peterborough, Chatteris and Ramsey, became significant landowners and played a crucial role in shaping the Fen landscape. The Fens offered these congregations desirable havens of lonely life. Ramsey Abbey, founded in 969, became a major centre of learning. Descriptions from the abbey paint a striking picture of the Fen environment. The island stretches for some 2 miles in length and is garlanded round about with alder thickets and reed beds, and there was flowering ash for building the church. The island was encircled by eel-filled marshes, fish and swimming birds. Interest in the Fens continued. In around 1020, during the reign of King Canute, a dyke was dug from Bodsey near Ramsey to Peterborough, likely aimed at improving drainage and providing safer travel. While centres of religious life, the Fen monasteries also acquired extensive local landholdings, controlling the farming, trade, and lives of the people on their lands. Located on the North Sea, they were, however, vulnerable to Viking invaders who targeted their wealth. During the medieval period, the monastic influence continued, and the Fens were known for an astonishing quantity of fish. The Domesday Book of 1086 valued the Abbot of Ramsey's fishing and mere in Home Parish, part of Whittlesea Mere, at a substantial £10. In fact, eels were so common that they were even used as currency and to pay rent, with Ely famously said to derive from Island of Eels. In 1150, the monks of Ramsey paid a rent of 3,000 eels to the monks of Peterborough for permission to quarry stone at Barnock for building work. However, the terrain, which seemed picturesque and abundant in natural resources, was far from hospitable. In 1216, King John, in the midst of a campaign to reclaim rebel-held lands, lost the crown jewels in the Wash. As he attempted to cross the tidal estuary, he misjudged the dangerous conditions, and his baggage train, including the jewels, was swept away by the rising tide. This disaster, combined with his deteriorating health and political troubles, marked a low point in John's reign, which ended shortly after with his death from dysentery. Over time, the beginnings of more deliberate drainage efforts developed, often driven by monastic orders. The first dikes in the Great Fen area appear to have been dug in the 12th century. Monk's Lode was dug by the monks of Salisbury Abbey to transport stone from Barnock, leading to disputes with Ramsey Abbey over land access. Wheatley's Drain was dug around the same time. By the 13th century, land within the present Woodwalton Fen National Nature Reserve, owned by Ramsey Abbey, had been sufficiently drained for summer sheep grazing and mowing marsh. In 1487, Bishop Morton of Ely caused Morton's Lean to be cut, the first straight drain in the fenland, to improve water flow and navigation between Peterborough and Wisbech. Despite these changes, the fens largely maintained a natural untamed state. As one great historian of the fenlands, W. H. Wheeler, says, "So wild a country naturally reared up a people as wild as the fen, and many of the fenmen were as destitute of all the comforts and amenities of civilized life as their isolated huts could make them. Their occupation consisted in dairying and haymaking, looking after the beasts and sheep which grazed in the fen in summer, and in winter gaining a living by fishing or fowling. The most characteristic sound in Fenland was probably the croaking of the many frogs, who were known as fen nightingales." Of course, for generations, it had been the monasteries that took on the responsibility of keeping the drainage channels clear. However, following the dissolution of the monasteries in 1537, during the English Reformation, the fens fell neglected. Where the monastic system had established a clear, if sometimes inefficient, system of fen management, the new landowners, often members of the aristocracy based outside of East Anglia, lacked this same institutional memory. Without regular maintenance, the wetlands expanded, and the land returned to its natural waterlogged state. However, this turned out only to be a temporary setback. By the early 1600s, King Charles I saw an opportunity in the fens. Beneath the marshes lay rich, fertile peat soil, perfect for farming. But properly draining such a vast and unpredictable landscape required bold thinking and deep pockets. In 1630, a group of wealthy landowners, known as the Gentlemen Adventurers, led by Francis Russell, the 4th Earl of Bedford, came forward with a plan. In return for financing the drainage works, they were promised large tracts of newly reclaimed farmland. Central to this scheme was Cornelius Vermuyden, a Dutch engineer with expertise in taming marshlands in his own country. Vermuyden's plans were bold and innovative. The first step was to dig the old Bedford River, a straight channel running from Erith to Denver, speeding up the flow of water into the sea. Vermuyden's scheme also included embankments, sluices, and washes, controlled flood zones like the Ouswash Reservoir, which could safely store excess water during heavy rains. The drainage relied heavily on wind-powered pumps, and by the mid-1600s, windmills with distinctive sails became a familiar sight on the Fenland horizon. 9 were recorded in Woodwalton parish alone. But even with these innovations, the challenge of draining the fens was immense. The work required constant maintenance and adaptation. And, as is so often the case with technological progress, not everyone welcomed the changes. For the people who had lived in the fens for generations, the wetlands were a vital resource. They fished, hunted wildfowl, gathered reeds, and grazed animals on the seasonal floodplains. These Fenlanders saw the drainage as a theft of their common land and their livelihoods. Their resistance was fierce. Known as the Fen Tigers, they fought back, smashing dikes, tearing down dams, and even setting reed beds on fire to sabotage the works. The Fen Tigers became legends of local folklore, and even today, a tiger appears on the Fenland flag, a symbol of their defiance. At first, Oliver Cromwell, who lived in Ely, supported the Fenlanders' cause. As MP for Cambridge, he spoke out against the King's plans, defending the rights of the commoners who depended on the wetlands. But Cromwell's stance changed over time. After the English Civil War, Cromwell saw an opportunity to profit from the drainage works and backed the second phase of Vermuyden's project. While his reversal earned him enemies, it also helped to fuel enormous technological progress and innovation in the Fenlands. Over time, the Fens were transformed into a major corn-growing region, with towns and villages emerging on what had once been waterlogged land. A key driver of this transformation was the Bedford Level Corporation, established in the 17th century. This organisation, made up of adventurers who invested in large-scale drainage projects, controlled vast areas of the Fenland and had the power to levy taxes to fund their operations. Despite numerous challenges and controversies, their efforts fundamentally reshaped the middle level of the Fens through the construction of new channels, such as the New Bedford River, and the implementation of sluices and barrier breaks. The middle level itself spans an immense 165,000 acres, requiring constant oversight, innovation and investment. By 1748, at least 250 drainage mills were operating across the region, working tirelessly to pump water and maintain the delicate balance between land and water that allowed agriculture to flourish. However, this drainage had unintended consequences. As the peat soils dried and contracted, the land began to sink, leaving rivers and dikes at a higher level than the surrounding fields. This created a need for pumps to lift water from the field ditches into the main drainage channels. For a long period after the initial large-scale drainage, maps depicted the Great Fen area as a poor, wet, boggy place. However, the resources were carefully managed, with fen edge farms and villages utilising both higher arable land and lower wetlands for summer grazing. Valuable sedge and turf were transported to the region by boat. By 1820, villagers even collected butterflies, moths and bog plants to sell to collectors visiting the region. This reshaped the geography of the Fens, with the Isle of Ely connected to the mainland, and with the size of habitable and productive land massively expanding. Businessmen, driven by a desire to make profit, helped to boost agricultural yields, reshaping the British landscape and contributing to the wealth that fueled the Industrial Revolution. The Victorian period brought further dramatic changes with the arrival of efficient steam power. Steam-powered pumps gradually replaced the windmills, offering the advantage of continuous operation regardless of weather conditions and the ability to lift water over greater heights. This made it feasible to consider draining the remaining large mere, Whittlesea Mere, located in the large part of the present Great Fen area, which had become shallow and was considered by locals to be a dreadful nuisance. Ramsey, Ugg and Trundle meres had already been drained by the 1840s, leading to the cultivation of wheat and a fourfold increase in land value in those areas. The Victorian era also saw the arrival of the railways, with the Great Northern Railway line crossing the western side of Woodwalton Parish and Home Fen in 1850, an area described once as a quaking bog. A branch line from Home to Ramsey North, built in 1867, crossed the Great Fen area, primarily used to transport agricultural produce to new markets. Farms in the Woodwalton area even laid short tramways of their own to move produce to barges for transport to the Home Station dock. Draining the Fens didn't just boost the economy, it dramatically improved public health as well. For centuries, the marshy, stagnant waters of the Fenlands were the perfect breeding ground for Anopheles mosquitoes, carriers of a malaria-like illness known locally as ague. This debilitating fever plagued communities for generations, spreading through infected mosquito bites. As large-scale drainage projects reshaped the landscape in the 19th century, they also wiped out much of the mosquito habitat. Fewer stagnant pools meant fewer mosquitoes and less malaria. With improved drainage, cases of malaria steadily declined, and by the early 20th century, malaria had all but vanished from the Fens. Historical records and modern studies both point to drainage as a key factor in breaking the cycle of infection, turning the Fens from a disease hotspot into healthy, habitable farmland. Today, the Fens are held back by miles of embankments and kept dry by a network of pumping stations, a reminder that the land's very existence as farmland still depends on constant human intervention. Now, in the 21st century, a new chapter is unfolding, with the Great Fen Project, an ambitious attempt to restore parts of this once hostile landscape to something closer to its original wetland state. There is, of course, a certain irony in this. After centuries spent draining, dredging and engineering the Fens into submission, we are now asked to see value in the very waste that our ancestors fought to overcome. But controlling nature didn't just happen in the Fens. Just look at Pevensey Marshes, a stretch of low-lying land on England's south coast. Once a tidal lagoon, the area was gradually reclaimed through medieval engineering. By the 13th century, almost all of the present marshland had been reclaimed. The land was protected by a series of seawalls, and a network of drainage ditches carried excess water away. But this battle with the sea wasn't easy. In 1287, a massive storm breached the defences, flooding the levels. It took years to repair the damage, and new channels were dug to prevent future disasters. However, by the late 17th century, the last remaining tidal creeks were finally sealed off. The once wild coastline had been fully subdued, its waters confined behind carefully engineered barriers. Pevensey was no longer just a natural landscape, it was a human one. Then there's Porthmadog in Wales. The vast tidal estuary of Traeth Mawr, situated on the Irish Sea, was a dangerous and shifting landscape. Quicksand swallowed travellers, and the river Afon Glaslyn shaped the land as it pleased. But in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, William Maddox set out to tame the land. Maddox was a visionary. He believed that the estuary could be turned into productive farmland, but to do so, he had to hold back the sea. Between 1808 and 1811, he built the Cobb, a massive embankment stretching 1,600 yards across the water. The impact was immediate. Over 1,500 acres of land were reclaimed, forever altering the geography of the region. The Cobb was more than just a flood barrier, it also became a vital transport link. By the 1830s, the Festiniog Railway was running across it, carrying slates from the quarries of Blaenau Festiniog to the port at Porthmadog, named for the man himself. What was once a shifting tidal estuary was now a controlled and productive landscape, serving both agriculture and industry. But England's mastery over nature wasn't just about land reclamation. Under the Norman kings, vast areas of land were designated as royal forests, not to be cultivated or settled, but to be preserved for hunting. Unlike the drained fenlands or reclaimed marshes, royal forests were about limiting human influence. No one could hunt in these lands without the king's permission. Even clearing trees or gathering firewood was strictly controlled. Royal forests were not wild in the way we think of nature today. They were carefully maintained, managed landscapes designed to serve the elite. Forest law was harsh, with severe penalties for those who broke it. The forests may not have been drained or walled off like the Fens or Pevensey, but they were still shaped by human hands. In England, the taming of the land, the removal of perceived dangers and inconveniences, has arguably fostered a different kind of appreciation for the natural world than we might see elsewhere. As Alan McFarlane suggests, the English love of nature and the countryside may have developed in parallel with urbanisation and industrialisation, as nature became something to be enjoyed from a position of relative control and security. Whether it's heathland, moorland, or even ancient woodland, what we consider nature in England is overwhelmingly the result of human labour over centuries. Nature didn't just happen, we made it. However, over time, we have started to lose sight of this history. Forgetting our role in creating the landscapes that we know and love, we have started treating human intervention as a threat rather than as a time-honoured legacy. The modern green agenda, with its dense web of regulations, arbitrary biodiversity targets, and reflexive hostility to development, treats every human touch on the land as an act of vandalism. It locks us into paralysis, where every new house, every new railway, every new flood defence must fight its way through years of consultation, litigation, and ideological obstruction. The irony is that our ancestors, the very people who gave us the landscapes that we now romanticise, understood that nature is not fragile, sacred, or separate. They knew it to be something to work with, to work upon, and, when necessary, to work against. They understood that survival, prosperity, and beauty often depended not on leaving the land untouched, but on shaping it with confidence and care. The landscapes we now cherish, from the rolling South Downs to the Norfolk Broads, are not ancient relics of unspoiled nature, they are the direct result of millennia of human toil. Of course, this mindset is not unique to Britain. It is shared by some of our northern European neighbours. For centuries, Dutch engineers have waged a relentless battle against the North Sea, reclaiming land and taming rivers through a vast network of dikes, canals, and pumps. Expanding their nation's footprint has never simply been about survival. It is a bold and ongoing defiance of nature's will. From the medieval construction of seawalls to the ambitious Zuiderzee works and the Delta works, some of the most impressive engineering feats in human history, the Dutch have turned water management into a national identity. Roughly a third of the country now lies below the sea level, yet it thrives thanks to this mastery of land reclamation. As the old saying goes, God may have created the world, but it was the Dutch who created the Netherlands. This was the spirit which once defined Britain. We shaped the fens, drained the marshes, cleared the forests, straightened the rivers, and carved the harbours. We built England, not as a land of untamed wilderness, but as a living, working, evolving landscape, made beautiful precisely because it was made useful. As you punt down the Cam, sipping champagne and nibbling strawberries, remember that the idyllic scene before you is not nature's gift, but human ingenuity at its finest.